So let's create a structure for student information. And for structure, we use struct student. So the struct is the keyword and student is the name we give to this structure. One main point is that in the board lectures, I said the keyword is struct, S-T-R-U-C. That is wrong. The keyword is struct, S-T-R-U-C-T. Okay. Everything else I told is correct. So you have to just replace wherever I use struc to struct. That's a mistake I made. Right now, so let's say I'm going to create a student structure, and so with name, student name of 50 characters, and integer age, let's say, the float marks, let's say this mark is, let's say, it can be a float number, and he has an address. So I'm going to first make an address structure which contains int house number, character array of street name, a country name, let's say, right? And I'm going to do the following. We need a student can have multiple addresses. Okay, one is his home, his parents' home, and other can be the place he is staying in Goa, his hostel address, for example. So he can have multiple addresses. So therefore, I want to use an array here. I want to use an array, but it has to be dynamically allocated because maybe a student has only one address. So therefore, I would want to use, or the student wants to give only one address. So I would want to use an array which will be dynamically allocated, and therefore I am going to write a pointer student. So, okay, and this is going to be a pointer to so right now what you see is I declared a struct address here, and here in the student class I have now declared a pointer to student address. Okay. Now what I basically want is an array which will now be later dynamically allocated depending on how many address the student is going to give. I'm going to read this thing from the student. From the user, I'm going to read this fact. So let me do that. So what is it I'm going to do? I'm going to write a function now which reads this information from the student and maybe prints it. Okay. So void read student info. Okay. So this function is basically going to read the student info and store it. So I'm going to first create a struct student. A structure has been created, and I'm going to ask the student printf /n enter your name, right? And then I ask the student to enter name. So I'm going to scan off the name, and I'm going to say percentage s. The name can have, let's say, a space, and therefore it's a full name I'm asking. So space should be allowed, and then I ask the name. What name? The student structure dot name is now passed. Next, what I would want is I'm going to ask the next what I want is the following. I want enter your name is done. So next I want this enter age. percentage D, and there I'm going to pass the address of student dot name. It's clear? Okay. Right. What else do we want? Next, let's say I want the float. So I've got the marks. I'm going to print up all these things, and I'm going to write name percentages slash n age percentage d slash n marks percentage d slash n and student dot name student dot marks. Okay, I just made a mistake here. This is age, right? And I'm going to now I'm going to call this function from below. Create student. Okay, let's call this function. Yeah, something is wrong somewhere. Okay. First, I will put a percentage here. First thing, then student dot mark seems to be. This is a float. Okay, this is all enter and integer. Okay, and now I'm supposed to enter. Oh, I made a mistake here. It's student dot. This is age, right? And next thing is I want to ask the student to enter the his or her marks, right? Yeah. So percentage f comma and student dot marks. Okay. So I have got all these things. Now I want to ask his address. So first thing I would ask is how many addresses does he have? Let's get that first. So I need to have a variable here which basically tells how many addresses he has. Int num is equal to 0, and I'm going to write. So I'm going to ask that. Okay, fine. And I'm going to scan it. Okay. Once I have this, what I can do is I can allocate this many addresses. I can allocate memory for this many addresses, which I'm going to do by writing student dot address is equal to, it has to be typecast into an address star, and I have to write malloc, and I have to write how many addresses do I want. I want to write num into size of into struct, right? Okay, this will give me the address. Next thing is the following. Once I have this, I ask the student to, okay, I'm going to write a for loop which goes from I equal to 0, I less than none, I plus plus. Um, so I'll just ask printf. So what are the parameters in the address? What are the, so house number, street name, and country, right? So its first is house number. House number for address, let's say percentage I, and scanf. House number is percentage D, which is, and I pass in student dot address of I, and I need to pass its address. So student dot address of I is the student dot address of I is okay, we'll only get this, and then I have to pass in its house number, right? And I need to pass the address of that. So that's what I have done here. Next thing I have to do is I have to printf. I have to ask for his or her street name, which is again I like this, and I type in percentage S here. The street name can have, let's assume no space, and I need to now give the ith address. What is it? Street name or something? Yeah, street name. Okay, so imagine here I put an ampersand because it's an integer. On the other hand, street name is an array, and therefore this is the pointer itself. If I wanted to give the first location address, I could have put 0 here, and I could have given address here. Okay. Let's have that here, and next country I won't use that. And next thing I can do is I ask for country. Copy this column there, column there. Yeah. So and then scanf percentage S, comma, okay, I need to let's just return this info by, okay. I have the student info which I have now read from the user, and I want to return it. Okay, I'm going to return student. Good. So the return type will be struct. So now this is returned. So one thing you need to keep in mind is that I have allocated memory for this address which has not yet been freed. So I will have to free this later. So this, I'm going to call this function here, read student info here, and I'm going to take struct student. Okay. I'm going to read this here. Let me just comment the entire thing. Okay, so this is my only program right now. This is the only function which will be executed. I have commented the entire thing above, and now this function read student info has been called. It's going to get all this information from the user, and I'm now going to write a function which will print this info. Okay. So it's going to be a void function, void print. And it's going to take this. It's going to take the student struct, and it's going to write. Okay, so it's going to first write information. Let's just write student name, percentages, /n, age, percentage d /n, marks, percentage f /n. Then I want to go through the address. So this will be, and then I'm going to write student, the name is student dot name, comma student dot age, comma student dot marks. Then I'm going to go through. Right now I don't know how many. Okay, so here is an issue. I don't know how many addresses are there. So this is also an information which we need to store in this database. So I'm going to have, we have to store in this structure. So I'm going to add an extra integer called num of address. All right, and this is be now set to this is going to be set here. Student dot this is sector. That value is assigned. So I'm going to then now just call that. Okay. And now I'll just print everything. So this is for address. First address, house number, percentage d /n, that is street name, percentages, followed by country. Percentages /n, and I will write student dot address of I dot house number, comma then I also. Okay, this should print the student info. So I can call this function here. So it's going to print with this. And finally, I need to have a function which clears all the memory. I'm going to right, so that I should clear the memory which has been allocated. So let's write that also. Let's write that, and that will be the end of the program. And so to clear this, I should write free student dot student dot address. Okay, so that's free. So let's now compile this and see what will happen. Okay, so a lot of errors, and we'll fix each one of them and one by one. First is student declared here. It's in okay. So clear memory. It's calling students. It has to be student, right? So let's just first fix that. The easiest one, probably. That's done. Next is okay. So free is not okay. So the compiler does not know what this function free is. That's because we didn't include stdlib. Okay, that's also done. Next is I is okay. The compiler does not know I. That's something we should fix. We didn't probably write what is I. Next. Okay, so percentage is not put here. So where is it? Right there. Let's see now. GCC. What is it? Read.cc. Yeah. Now let's see. Let's run. It's asking name. Let me just try to go in. Age is 23. Marks 28.3. Number of addresses. Okay, let's have two addresses. House number 4, address 0. Okay, I should make it address 1. For people, it has to be address 1 and address 2. Okay, so anyway, let's have address 84 and street name will be something, country name will be something, and house number. So the next address is 74 and street name to be country name. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So this is we have the name, age, mark, and address, and right. So it's clearly the, so we have everything here. Just like we entered, we have got everything back. Okay, so this is basically we have seen how. So what we have seen here is that we have seen how to use scanf. We have seen how to use structures, how to allocate memory dynamically, how to pass parameters through a function, how to return structures through a function, how to pass structures as parameters to function. All these things we saw here. Also how to access structure elements. So as you could see here, structure. I mean, so we have now created a structure inside a structure, and that's why we need two dots here. So it's clear that we can use this dot to access one structure inside and the structure inside and the structure. These things can be done, and right. So this is a fairly complicated setting. I mean, so we have basically seen we have tried to make an example where we use everything required. And one important thing is that we also freed the memory we allocated, and that's something you need to be careful. You have to do it. As you could see, this is not something we cleared this memory, not even in the function where we allocated the memory, right? We kept track of this information, that it's stored inside the structure information, and that's something which we had to clear it later. So you also you need to do that when you write your own programs. You have to do that. Okay. So finally, I just want to remind you that the keyword to use structure is struct, struct, and in my board talks I said it is struc. That's wrong. You have to use struct. Okay. That's it. Thank you.